I saw this. Morant. Well, let me tie this in. The Dodgers. So my perspective on the Dodgers, I'm not Catholic. I'm not particularly, as you guys know, super religious person. Just so you know, I was raised Southern Baptist Church. I know the Bible well. I believe in God. I would consider myself to be a Christian, but I am not a zealous religious advocate. Whether you're Jewish, whether you're Muslim, whether you are Christian, I don't really have a strong opinion on your religion, right? I just don't. I think everybody should have the right to practice and pursue whatever religion they believe makes the most sense for they and their family, okay? There's my perspective on religion. I would ask you to think about this, though. As you see what is clearly these nuns that are engaging in drag show, basically, in a religiously denigrating way, right? They are mocking the crucifixion. They are mocking the Catholic faith. And they are being honored as a part of Pride Night with the LA Dodgers. Shouldn't our position be that all religious faith should be treated the same? In other words, if you are going to mock, like these nuns are, the Catholic faith, why not mock Islam? Why not mock Jewish people? Why not mock Hindus? Any religious faith out there. And what would the reaction be if this religious faith, let's say that this, instead of mocking nuns, that this religious faith was instead making fun of Muslims? What if they pretended to be Muhammad, dressed up and denigrated the Muslim faith as a part of their pride and drag show? What do you think would happen? First of all, those people would probably get killed, right? There'd be a fatwa out on them. The Islamic faith would not allow Muhammad to be mocked. And not only would they not allow Muhammad to be mocked, they would suggest that anyone mocking Muhammad deserved to be murdered. And if the Dodgers had a Pride Night where Muhammad was mocked as a part of the Pride Night, all of the people that were involved in that mockery would be in danger of being murdered. And the entire LA Dodgers organization would need increased police protection because the players themselves would likely come under threat. Wouldn't be doing it as a result, right? So why is the kindness of Christianity mocked, but any other religious faith that was mocked would be unacceptable and the Dodgers would never even consider doing it? I would suggest that it's the kindness of Christianity which makes it particularly mockable. Well, the Dodgers have a huge Hispanic fan base that's overwhelmingly Catholic. The Dodgers have tons of Catholic fans that show up. If you wouldn't mock Judaism, and if you wouldn't mock the Muslim faith, and if you wouldn't mock Hindus as a part of a gay pride night, why is it okay to mock Catholics? It's a question that I don't think the Dodgers have a very good answer for, but my position would be set the precedent of treating all religions the same, worthy of respect. If you wouldn't mock any other faith, why is it okay to mock the Catholic faith? Worth thinking about. Finally, I saw where Morant put a post up. He said bye to several family members, and as a result, the Memphis Police Department felt compelled to engage in a wellness check. Morant's, I believe, 23 years old. It seems quite clear to me that he is not healthy mentally. And I would just make this point. Everyone thinks that if they became young and famous, they would handle youth and fame well. Everyone does. The reality is most people who are youthful and very famous do not end up climbing to the absolute apex of their professions. In other words, the Leonardo DiCaprios, famous at, I believe, 19 years old since Titanic came out, global phenomenon. LeBron James, famous since he was 17 or 18 years old, are actually the exception, not the rule. What's far more common is River Phoenix, What's far more common is Heath Ledger. What's far more common is a descent into drugs, alcohol, mental instability because fame is overwhelming. And I'm afraid that's what's going on right now with Ja Morant. He doesn't seem to be able to handle the expectations and all of the attention that's on him. And I think social media is making it worse. And I would use Ja Morant as an example in this way. Adam Silver came out and said that most of the young NBA players that he interacts with are profoundly unhappy. You wonder why that would be. You're young, fabulously wealthy, getting to play a game for a living. I think social media is incredibly toxic for young people. And I would tie it in this way with Ja Morant. 30% of teenage girls have thought about killing themselves in the last year. 30%. 1 in every 3. Now, I mocked the CDC over COVID because I think they did an awful job. But our CDC came out with a big report. I was reading it. That social media for young people is very toxic. And it's toxic in a way that I don't think a lot of people have thought about very much because social media arrives so quickly. But I think that comparison is often the enemy of happiness. And what I mean by that is if you are constantly on social media, scrolling and looking very often at people who are wealthier, better looking, and presenting an artificial version of their life, you get drawn into a toxic medley. And if you are a public figure, that's even worse because you go in and you read everything that people are saying about you all the time. And it's different than back in the day where you could truly choose not to read a newspaper. You could choose not to put on television, and you could engage in real face-to-face interaction. And I get asked about this all the time. I'm 44 years old. People go into the comments and they say, man, these comments are nasty. Man, how do you put your content out there on a day-to-day basis with all the toxicity that is out there? And the answer is, it's not real, right? Face-to-face interaction, people never say a negative word to me, right? Much of social media, and I've been making this analogy for a while, is like a carnival funhouse mirror. It's an artificial, distorted version of real life. But if you're a kid and you're 14 or 15 years old and you stand in front of that mirror and you look at that reflection from the carnival funhouse mirror and it makes you look too fat or it makes you look too skinny and you're reacting to what people say, I think it's profoundly disruptive to your mental health. And so I don't claim to know the answer. I can tell you that we try to keep all of our kids off social media. I don't want my kids sitting around on Instagram all day. I don't want my kids sitting around on Twitter all day. I don't think it's healthy. And I'm making that decision as someone who works in a public arena and works in social media. Do you know some of the people who are most restrictive of their kids and their ability to be on social media and on the internet? Big tech executives. If they're choosing to do something different with their own kids than what they're trying to do with yours, why is that? And I tie it in with Ja Morant, a guy who at 23 years old is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The world should be his oyster. Instead, they're doing a wellness check on him because they were concerned after he said bye on social media to all of his family members. Was he behaving potentially in a suicidal manner? Well, if he was, it's actually super common for people of his age. And, comparison is the enemy of gratitude. Warren Buffett tells a great story. He says, hey, if you could, I think it's really worth thinking about for all Americans. He said, hey, if you could, there are 8 billion marbles in a jar. Let's pretend there's a jar, and it could have 8 billion marbles in it. That represents every single person on the globe today. He said, if you would randomly walk up and trade your own life with whatever marble you pulled out of the 8 billion there, then that's a sign that you would obviously be not living at a very high level of wealth or opportunity. The data reflects not one single American, even the poorest among us, should ever, there's 330 million of us, should ever be willing to trade our marble, right? That is the privilege, which is not talked about the most, that we all share, of being an American citizen. You know, if you're in the poorest subset of Americans, you'd be one of the wealthiest people in India, which is now the most populous country in the world. Let me repeat that, because a lot of people don't understand it. If you are one of the poorest Americans, abject poverty here, you'd be one of the 20% most wealthy in India, which is now the most populous country in the world. It's past China. Gratitude is the most powerful of all emotions. And I think that's such an interesting example. Would you trade your life and your experiences and your country with a random person in the world today? If you're an American, the answer should never be no. That's the privilege that we all have. How often do you think about that? How often do you think about what you have that you're grateful for? Social media is primarily focused on comparison. You look at what you don't have as opposed to what you do. Just keep it in the back of your mind. Maybe that's a little bit of wisdom for a guy who's been making a living for 20 years on the internet. But I feel very fortunate because most of my life, based on when I was born, was not internet. I didn't have a computer at home. I didn't have an email address when I went off to college. I became an adult before I ever got on the internet and spent any time there. Kids are growing up now in a comparison-bedecked world that I think makes them profoundly unhappy. Whether they're one of those random teenage girls out there, the 30% that have thought about committing suicide in the last year, or even one of the most skilled and wealthy young people in America today, Morant. Why is that profound unhappiness so significant? I think it's comparison which steals joy. Just think about it. All right, I appreciate all of you